My wife invited me to a business dinner with a Japanese client, and she told me to just sit there, smile, and try not to drool on myself. I kept quiet and pretended I was just a confused old man who needed his meat cut for him. But then I heard the client say something in Japanese that made my blood run cold. He looked me dead in the eye, smiling like a shark, and asked my wife when the old monkey was finally going to die so he could spend my money on her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They didn't know that 40 years ago I built a shipping empire in Tokyo. They didn't know I understood every single word, and right then and there I knew my life as I knew it was over, but my war was just beginning. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to love you, hit that like button right now, because this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the revenge that is coming, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I am Harrison Caldwell, 70 years old, and tonight I am sitting in the most expensive omakase restaurant in New York City. The lighting is dim, the air smells of vinegar rice and expensive perfume, and I am watching my life fall apart over a plate of $200 Wagyu beef. My wife Lydia is sitting to my left. She is 42 years old, 28 years my junior, and tonight she looks spectacular in a black dress that cost more than my first car. She is leaning in close to me, picking up a slice of beef with her chopsticks and holding it to my mouth like I am a toddler in a high chair. "Open wide, Harrison darling," she says, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that everyone else thinks is devotion. "You need your protein, sweetheart. You have been looking so frail lately." I open my mouth and take the bite. I have to. That is the role I am playing. The frail old husband. The retired logistics tycoon who is slowly losing his grip on reality. I chew the meat slowly, staring blankly at the table, while Lydia wipes the corner of my mouth with a linen napkin. I can feel the eyes of the other diners on us. They look at us and they see a devoted young wife taking care of her declining husband. They think I am lucky. God, they have no idea. Across the table sits Kenji Sato. He is 45, slick, handsome in a way that makes you want to punch him, and he is wearing a suit that fits him a little too perfectly. Lydia introduced him as a potential investor from Tokyo. Someone interested in merging with my former logistics company, the one I still hold a majority stake in. "Mr. Caldwell, it is an honor to finally meet the legend," Kenji says in perfect unaccented English. His smile is bright and engaging. "Lydia speaks so highly of your vision." I nod slowly, giving him my best vacant smile. "Thank you, young man," I say, making my voice sound a little thinner, a little weaker than it actually is. "It is good to meet you." Lydia pats my hand. "Harrison is just happy to be out of the house, Kenji. He gets confused with all the business talk these days, so we will keep it simple for him, won't we?" "Of course," Kenji says, bowing his head respectfully. "We do not want to tire him out." Then he reaches for the sock bottle to pour himself a drink, and his eyes lock with Lydia's. The air between them shifts. It is subtle, but I see it. A flicker of heat. A secret shared in a glance. And then as he pours the clear liquid into his cup, he switches languages. He speaks in Japanese fast and low, thinking the old American man across from him hears nothing but gibberish. "Look at this old relic," he says in Japanese, his voice full of contempt. "Look at his hand shaking. How do you stand touching him, Lydia? He smells like a hospital room." I freeze. 40 years ago, I lived in a small apartment in Shinjuku. I spent a decade in Japan, building trade routes, negotiating with hard-nosed businessmen, and navigating the complex social hierarchy of Tokyo. I speak Japanese better than I speak French. I dream in Japanese sometimes. But I do not react. I cannot react. Not yet. I force my hand to tremble just a little bit more as I reach for my water glass. I take a sip, letting a little bit dribble down my chin just to sell the act. Lydia sighs loudly, acting the martyr. "Oh, Harrison, careful." She dabs my chin again. "See, Kenji. This is what I deal with every day. It is exhausting. Kenji laughs a short, cruel sound. He switches back to English. You are a saint, Lydia, truly. Your dedication is inspiring. Then back to Japanese. Just poison his tea already, or push him down the stairs. I cannot wait much longer to get my hands on his assets. And on you. My heart is hammering against my ribs so hard, I am afraid they can see it through my shirt. The rage is a physical thing, hot and heavy in my gut. This man, this stranger, is sitting at my table drinking my wine and discussing my murder with my wife. And she is not stopping him. She laughs, a tinkling sound that used to make me smile but now sounds like breaking glass. She looks at him and says in English, "Oh, stop it. You are terrible." She understands. She might not speak Japanese fluently, but she understands the tone. She knows he is mocking me and she is enjoying it. She feeds off it. I feel a wave of nausea that has nothing to do with the rich food. This is the woman I saved from bankruptcy 10 years ago. The woman I gave a life of luxury. The woman I trusted to hold my hand when my time eventually came. And she is just waiting for me to die. Kenji leans back in his chair, swirling his sake. He looks around the private dining room and then fixes his gaze on me again. He speaks in Japanese, his eyes cold and dead. When he is gone, I am going to gut that office of his. Burn those stupid paintings. That big mahogany desk he loves so much, I am going to throw it out the window. We will put a bed in there, Lydia. A big round bed right in the middle of the room where he built his empire. That is where we will celebrate spending his $50 million. My hand spasms. It is involuntary. My chopstick clatters onto the expensive ceramic plate, making a loud, sharp noise that cuts through the quiet room. Lydia jumps. "Harrison, what is wrong with you? You are making a mess." I look down at my hand. It is shaking for real now, not because I am pretending, but because every fiber of my being wants to reach across the table, grab Kenji by his silk tie and smash his face into the table. I want to roar at them in fluent Japanese. I want to tell them I know everything. I want to see the color drain from their faces. But I am Harrison Caldwell. I did not build a global empire by acting on impulse. I built it by being patient, by being smarter, by waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If I expose them now, they will just deny it. They will say I am senile, that I am hearing things. Lydia has already been planting seeds with my doctor, suggesting my mind is slipping. If I have an outburst here, it will only prove her point. She will use it to fast-track her conservatorship over me. No. I need proof. I need undeniable, cold, hard evidence. I take a deep, ragged breath. I look up at Lydia, my eyes wide and watery. "I am sorry, my dear," I stammer, my voice trembling. My hand. It just slipped. I feel a little dizzy. Lydia rolls her eyes, making sure Kenji sees her annoyance. "It is okay, Harrison. Just sit still. Do not touch anything else." She signals the waiter for the check. Kenji smiles at me, a predator looking at wounded prey. "Do not worry, Mr. Caldwell," he says in English. "We are almost done. We just need to celebrate our future partnership." He raises his sake cup. Lydia raises her wine glass. "To new beginnings," Kenji says. "To the future," Lydia adds, smiling at him over the rim of her glass. I slowly, painfully lift my water glass. My hand is shaking, but my mind is crystal clear. I look at Kenji. I look at my wife. I see them for exactly what they are. Monsters. Parasites. I bring the glass to my lips. "To the future," I whisper. And in my head, I finish the sentence. "Enjoy this drink, Kenji. Enjoy this moment, Lydia. Because this is the last time you will ever drink to my demise. You think you are looking at a helpless old man, but you are looking at the man who is going to burn your entire world to the ground." I drink the water. It tastes like ash. As we stand up to leave, Lydia helps me with my coat, treating me like a child putting on a snowsuit. Kenji stands close to her, too close. His hand brushes against her lower back, a touch that lingers a second too long to be professional. He leans in close to my ear, ostensibly, to help me with my scarf, and whispers in Japanese one last time. "Hurry up and die, old man." The clock is ticking. I look at him. I give him a confused, blinking stare. I act as if I did not hear a thing. But inside, the old Harrison, the ruthless businessman from Tokyo, is waking up. He is dusting off his armor. He is sharpening his sword. We walk out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. The valet brings my car around. Lydia helps me into the passenger seat and then climbs into the back, with Kenji claiming they need to discuss a few more contract details on the ride to his hotel. As I sit there staring out the window at the passing city lights, I realize something. The sadness is gone. The shock is fading. All that is left is a cold, hard resolve. They want to play games. They want to use language as a weapon. Fine. I close my eyes and let a small, dark smile touch my lips. Game on, if you want to know what happens when I get home and what I find in her private safe. Type Part 2 in the comments. You will not believe what she was hiding. The partition between us and the driver was up, creating a cocoon of silence in the back of the limousine. The leather seats were cool against my back, but the air inside felt stifling, thick, with the scent of Lydia's expensive perfume and the lingering ghost of the sake Kenji had consumed. Lydia sat as far away from me as the seat allowed, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of her phone screen. Her thumbs moved across the glass with a frantic, rhythmic intensity. I did not need to see the screen to know who she was texting. The man we had just left. The man who had laughed about gutting my office and turning it into a playground for their affair. I watched her for a moment, studying the profile of the woman I had married. In the soft light of the passing street lamps, she looked angelic. That was her greatest weapon. She looked like a caretaker, a martyr, a saint patiently enduring the twilight years of a fading old man. But beneath that flawless skin was a calculator, cold and unfeeling, tallying up the days until my expiration. I cleared my throat, a dry, raspy sound that made her shoulders tense. She did not look up. She just sighed, a long exhale of performative exhaustion. "That young man," I said, keeping my voice soft, laced with the uncertainty of the senile character I was playing. "He seemed very intense, Lydia. I could not follow everything, but did he say something about dying or death?" Lydia's thumbs stopped moving. For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw a flash of genuine panic in the tightening of her jaw, but just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a look of pitying condescension that she had perfected over the last 6 months. She finally turned to look at me, slipping her phone into her clutch with a sharp click. "Oh, Harrison," she said, her voice dropping into that slow, enunciated tone one uses with a slow child. "You are doing it again. Did you forget your evening medication? I put it right on the counter for you." I did not forget. I flushed them down the toilet because they make my head feel like it is stuffed with cotton. But I blinked at her, feigning confusion. I do not think so." But he used the word. "I am sure of it. He was talking about a dead market, Harrison." She snapped, the sweetness evaporating. "A dead market. Economic stagnation. He was explaining why the merger is so critical right now." "God, why do you always have to twist things?" She reached out and adjusted my tie, not with affection, but with the rough tug of a mother fixing a messy child before church. "It is embarrassing, you know," she continued, her voice rising in pitch. "I am trying to save your legacy. I am trying to secure our future because you are clearly not capable of it anymore. And you sit there imagining insults. You make me look like a fool, Harrison." Kenji was being respectful. He was honoring you, gaslighting, the modern word for an old torture. She was trying to make me doubt my own reality, to make me question the very language I had mastered before she was even born. She wanted me to believe that my mind was a sieve leaking facts and retaining only paranoia. If I were truly the man she thought I was, it would have worked. It would have crushed me. I looked down at my hands resting on my knees. I let them tremble. "I am sorry, Lydia," I whispered. "It is just the noise, the foreign words. It gets jumbled." She huffed, turning back to the window. "Just stop talking for the rest of the ride. You are exhausted. You are hearing things. Just let me handle the business." That is what a power of attorney is for, remember. We discussed this. We had not discussed it. She had mentioned it to my doctor while I was pretending to be asleep. But I nodded, retreating into the corner of the seat. The rest of the drive was silent, but my mind was screaming. Dead market. A clever lie. Close enough phonetically in English, perhaps, but in Japanese, the difference between market stagnation and wishing for an old man's death is a chasm that cannot be crossed. She was sloppy. She was arrogant. And that arrogance was going to be her undoing. When the car pulled up the long, winding driveway of our estate, the rain had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that blurred the lights of the mansion. The driver opened the door for Lydia first. She stepped out, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. She did not wait. She did not offer a hand. She marched toward the front door, eager to be away from the burden of my presence, eager to call Kenji and laugh about how close I had come to the truth, and how easily she had shoved me back into the dark. I watched her disappear through the front doors. The heavy oak slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the night air. The driver, a new man named Thomas, whom Lydia had hired last week, looked at me with a mixture of pity and impatience. "Need a hand, sir?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the closed door. And for the first time that night, I let the mask drop. I straightened my spine. The tremor in my hands ceased instantly. My eyes, usually clouded and wandering for the benefit of my audience, sharpened into the cold, hard stare that had once made union leaders in Yokohama nervous. "No, Thomas," I said, my voice steady, deep, and devoid of any weakness. "I can manage." He blinked, startled by the sudden change in my demeanor, but I was already moving. I stepped out of the car with a fluidity that belonged to a man 20 years younger. I walked up the steps not with the shuffle of the elderly, but with the stride of a predator entering his territory. Inside, the house was quiet. Lydia had already gone upstairs, likely to her private suite, where she claimed she needed space to sleep because of my snoring. Another lie. She needed space to video chat with Kenji without headphones. I did not go upstairs. I turned left down the long hallway lined with portraits of ancestors who would have engaged Kenji in a duel for what he said tonight. I walked into my study. This room was my sanctuary, or it had been. Now, according to Kenji, it was destined to be a brothel for my wife and her lover. I closed the heavy double doors and locked them. I moved to the large oil painting of a storm at sea that hung behind my desk. I found the hidden latch on the frame and swung it open, revealing a wall safe. Lydia knew about the safe in the bedroom. She knew about the safe in the floor of the closet. She thought she knew everything, but she did not know about this one. This one was installed in 1990, before she was even in high school. I spun the dial, left, right, left. The combination was the date I signed my first international shipping contract. The mechanism clicked, a satisfying heavy sound of precision engineering. I pulled the handle and the heavy steel door swung open. Inside there were no stacks of cash, no jewelry. Lydia had already raided the other safes for those. Inside this safe there was only history. Stacks of documents, old passports with stamps from countries that no longer existed, and a single weather-beaten leather journal. I took the journal out. The leather was cracked, the binding loose. I carried it to my desk and switched on the green banker's lamp. I sat down in the leather chair that Kenji wanted to throw out the window. I ran my hand over the cover. I opened it. The pages were filled with dense vertical rows of Japanese kanji written in my own hand. 1985. The year I broke the dock strikes in Okinawa. The year I negotiated with the Yakuza to keep my ships safe. The year I learned that in business, as in war, the person who speaks first loses. I read the entry from November 12, 1985. The tiger does not announce his kill. He waits until the prey is drinking by the water, feeling safe, feeling superior. Then he strikes. I closed the book. The feeling of helplessness that had plagued me for months, the fog of the drugs she had been slipping me, the humiliation of the dinner, it all burned away. I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 2 a.m. I picked up the secure satellite phone I kept in the bottom drawer, a device Lydia did not know existed. She thought my cell phone was my only link to the world, a phone she monitored with spyware I had detected weeks ago. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. Twice. "Yeah," a voice answered, groggy but alert. No hello, no names. Sullivan. My old corporate counsel, the man who had buried bodies, metaphorically speaking, for me during the hostile takeovers of the 90s. He was retired now, living in a cabin in Montana fishing and trying to forget the sharks we used to swim with. "Sullivan," I said. There was a pause, the rustle of bedsheets. Then the voice changed. It lost the sleep. It gained an edge. "Harrison, you sound alive. I heard you were losing it." "That is what the grapevine says." "The grapevine is being fed poison," I said. "And so am I, literally and figuratively." Silence on the line. Then who? Lydia. And a partner. A Japanese national named Kenji Sato. "They are accelerating the timeline, Sullivan. They talked about my death tonight over dinner. They talked about gutting the company. They think I am senile. They think I am deaf and dumb." "And are you?" Sullivan asked, a hint of the old dark humor returning. I looked at the journal on my desk. I looked at my steady hands. "I am awake, Sullivan. I am wide awake. What do you need?" "I need the team, not the new boys in the legal department. I need the old guard. I need Donnelly for surveillance. I need Goldberg for the financials. And I need you to fly to New York tonight." "Tonight, Harrison, I am in my pajamas." "Then put on a suit," I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. "They want to play games with language. They want to play games with the law. They are trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of my life." I paused, looking at the door, knowing Lydia was upstairs, dreaming of my funeral. "Wake them up, Sullivan. Wake them all up. We are going to war." I heard a deep breath on the other end, followed by the sound of a lamp clicking on. "I will be there by noon," Sullivan said. "Do not eat anything she gives you. Do not sign anything." "I know the drill," I said. I hung up the phone and leaned back in the chair. The darkness of the room felt different now. It was no longer a cage. It was a command center. I was not the victim in the tower anymore. I was the dragon in the basement, and they had just poked me one too many times. The next morning, the sun beat down on the estate with a humid, oppressive weight that felt like a premonition. I had tripped the circuit breaker for the central air conditioning at 4 a.m, ensuring the house would be stifling by breakfast. It was a petty move, perhaps, but discomfort makes people careless, and I needed Lydia distracted. By 9 o'clock, the temperature in the breakfast nook was climbing, and Lydia was pacing the terracotta tiles in her silk robe, fanning herself with a fashion magazine and snapping at the maid. She hated sweating. It ruined her blowout. It made her makeup slide. It made her human. When the doorbell rang, she practically ran to answer it, desperate for relief. Standing there was a man in a blue jumpsuit with a tool belt slung low on his hips and a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes. To anyone else, he was just a nameless service worker, the kind of person women like Lydia looked right through. To me, he was Donnelly, ex-narcotics, the best surveillance man in the tri-state area, and the only person I trusted to turn my home into a listening post without leaving a trace. I was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of coffee and trembling my hand just enough to make the spoon clatter against the ceramic saucer. It was a sound that drove Lydia crazy. "Thank God you are here," Lydia said, ushering Donnelly in. "It is a sauna in here. Just fix it. I do not care what it costs." Donnelly nodded, keeping his head down. "I will need to check the main vents, ma'am. Some of them are in the living areas." "Fine, just be quick," Lydia said, turning her back on him to check her reflection in the microwave door. She walked back to the island and picked up her phone. It was always there, attached to her hand, like an extra limb. She tapped out a message, probably complaining to Kenji about the heat and the old man. She set the phone down on the marble counter just for a second to pour herself a glass of iced tea. This was my window. It was a narrow, dangerous sliver of time. Donnelly was already moving toward the living room, but he needed physical access to her device to install the cloning software that would bypass her encryption. A remote hack would take too long, and Kenji's security was likely top tier. We needed a direct link. I looked at the steaming mug of coffee in front of me. It was fresh. It was scalding. And it was my weapon. I waited until Lydia turned to put the pitcher back in the fridge. I let out a low moan, a sound of confusion and distress, and then I swept my arm out in a clumsy spasm. The mug tipped. Dark, hot liquid cascaded off the edge of the island, splashing onto my lap and pooling on the pristine floor. I yelped, genuine pain mixing with my performance. Lydia spun around, her eyes wide with fury. "Harrison, for God's sake, look what you have done!" She rushed over not to check if I was burned, but to save her expensive rug from the spreading stain. She grabbed a handful of paper towels and started dabbing frantically at the floor, her face twisted in disgust. "I am sorry," I stammered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "My hand. It would not listen." "You are useless," Lydia hissed under her breath. "Just useless." She stood up, realizing the mess was too big for paper towels. "Stay there, do not move. I have to get the mop from the pantry." She turned and marched toward the pantry, which was down the hall. She left the phone on the counter. The moment she disappeared around the corner, the air in the kitchen changed. Donnelly was there in 2 strides. He did not look at me. He did not acknowledge the coffee soaking into my trousers. He pulled a small flat device from his pocket and plugged it into the charging port of Lydia's phone. His fingers flew across the screen. I watched the hallway, listening for the click of Lydia's heels. My heart was thumping a heavy drum in my chest. The burn on my leg was stinging, but the adrenaline was stronger. 10 seconds. I heard the pantry door open. Donnelly was still typing. 15 seconds. I heard the clatter of the mop bucket. "Done," Donnelly whispered. He yanked the cable out and slid his device back into his pocket, just as the click-clack of Lydia's heels echoed on the tile. He immediately turned his back to the counter and reached up to a vent cover near the ceiling, pulling out a screwdriver. Lydia burst back into the room, wielding the mop like a weapon. She stopped seeing the repairman so close to us. "What are you doing in here?" she asked suspiciously, her eyes darting from him to her phone. "Checking the airflow, ma'am," Donnelly said in a rough working-class accent. "This vent feeds the main intake. I think you have got a blockage." Lydia narrowed her eyes. She walked over to the counter and picked up her phone. She swiped the screen. It unlocked normally. She scrolled through her apps. Nothing looked different. She relaxed, but only slightly. She looked at me. I was still sitting in the puddle of coffee, shivering slightly. "Well, do not just stare at him, Harrison," she snapped. "Go change your pants. You smell like a diner." I started to slide off the stool, but Donnelly was not done. He needed to plant the audio bugs in the bedroom and the study. and he needed to get to her car to install the GPS tracker. "I need to check the thermostat in the master bedroom, ma'am," Donnelly said. "And the external unit is near the garage." Lydia sighed. "Fine. Follow me. But do not touch anything you do not have to." She led him out of the kitchen. I hobbled toward the stairs, gripping the banister. I needed to be upstairs. I needed to ensure she did not watch him too closely. I changed my trousers quickly, ignoring the red welt forming on my thigh. Pain was good. Pain kept me sharp. I walked down the hall toward the master bedroom. The door was open. Lydia was standing by the window watching Donnelly fiddle with the thermostat on the wall. "He is taking too long," she muttered. Donnelly's hand was moving behind his back, slipping a tiny listening device behind the heavy velvet drapes, while his other hand adjusted the dial. It was a magician's trick misdirection. But then Lydia turned. She turned right as Donnelly was withdrawing his hand from the drapes. "What was that?" she asked, her voice sharp. I froze in the doorway. Donnelly froze. "What was what, ma'am?" he asked calmly. "I saw your hand. Behind the curtain. Checking for drafts," she said. "Windows like these, they leak air. Makes the system work harder." Lydia took a step toward him. "I do not pay you to check for drafts. I pay you to fix the air." She was suspicious. Paranoia was a side effect of guilt, and Lydia was guilty as sin. She reached out toward the curtain where the bug was hidden. I had to stop her. I could not let her find it. I inhaled sharply, swallowing a mouthful of air and forcing it down the wrong pipe. I bent double, clutching my chest, and let out a hacking, wheezing cough that sounded like death itself. It was loud, violent, and terrifying. Lydia spun around. "Harrison," I gagged, stumbling into the room and grabbing onto the dresser for support. I knocked over a bottle of perfume, sending it crashing to the floor. Glass shattered. The scent of jasmine exploded in the room. "Harrison." Lydia screamed, rushing over to me. "Stop it. You are going to have a stroke." She grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. I continued to cough, my face turning red, my eyes watering. Over her shoulder, I saw Donnelly give me a microscopic nod. He finished securing the device and stepped back. "I will go check the outside unit now, ma'am," he said, slipping out of the room while Lydia was distracted by my performance. Lydia ignored him. She was looking at me with a mixture of fear and loathing. Not fear for my life, but fear of the inconvenience of me dying on the carpet before the paperwork was signed. "Breathe, you old fool, breathe," she hissed. I slowly brought the coughing under control, taking shallow, raspy breaths. I am okay," I wheezed. "Just dust." "You are impossible," she said, standing up and smoothing her robe. "You break everything you touch." She looked at the shattered perfume bottle, then at the empty doorway where Donnelly had been. She had forgotten about the curtain. "Get out," she said, pointing to the door. "Go to your room. I will have the maid clean this up." I nodded, keeping my head low, and shuffled out of the room. I walked down the hall, my legs feeling heavy, not from age, but from the sheer exhaustion of the act. I went into my study, the one room Lydia rarely entered because she found it boring. I locked the door. I went to the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the receiver Donnelly had left for me earlier, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. I put the earbuds in. I turned the dial. Static at first. Then a click. Then clear as a bell, the sound of Lydia pacing in the bedroom. I heard the crunch of glass under her shoes. I heard her dial her phone. "Kenji," she said, her voice tight. "The AC is out. The old man is falling apart. He spilled coffee on himself and then nearly choked to death in the bedroom. It is disgusting." I adjusted the volume. The clarity was terrifying. It was as if she was standing right next to me, whispering her hatred into my ear. I heard Kenji's voice on the other end, filtered through the cloned phone software. "Be patient, baby. Did you get the signature for the bank transfer?" "Not yet," she said. His hands were shaking too much today. But tonight, I will crush some of the sedatives into his soup. He will sign anything I put in front of him. I sat back in my leather chair, the earbuds cold in my ears. My hand went to the drawer where I kept my own stash of vitamins. I took out the bottle of sedatives she had been feeding me, the ones I had replaced with harmless sugar pills days ago. So that was the plan. Drug me into compliance. Sign away my liquid assets. I looked at the monitor on my desk where a GPS dot was blinking. Donnelly had tagged her car. We had eyes. We had ears. And now I knew exactly when she was going to strike. I leaned into the microphone on the receiver, knowing Donnelly was listening on his end in the van down the street. "Did you get that, Donnelly?" I asked softly. Loud and clear, Mr. Caldwell came the reply. "We are live." "Good," I said. "Let her cook the soup. I am feeling hungry." I sat in the driver's seat of my Lincoln, parked 3 blocks away from Le Petit Café. To the casual observer, I was just an elderly man taking a nap while waiting for his wife. My hat was pulled low over my eyes and my breathing was steady. But beneath the brim of my hat, my eyes were wide open and fixed on the audio receiver resting on the passenger seat. Lydia had told me she was going to a charity luncheon for the botanical gardens. She had kissed my cheek, smelling of expensive jasmine, and told me to rest. Instead, she had driven straight to a secluded booth at the back of this cafe to meet Kenji. I adjusted the volume on the receiver. The bug Donnelly had planted in her purse was high quality. I could hear the clink of silverware against china and the soft murmur of background jazz. Then I heard Kenji's voice. He was not speaking English. He had slipped comfortably into Japanese, the language he used when he wanted to be his true self. "How is the subject?" he asked, his tone clinical, like a scientist discussing a lab rat. "Did you start the new regimen?" I held my breath, waiting for Lydia's response. "Yes," she answered. Her voice was light, almost giddy. "I doubled the dose, just like you said. It is working faster than I thought. Yesterday he called the maid Martha. Her name is Elena. He looked right at his house and asked for his slippers, and he did not even realize he was using the name of his dead dog." A cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning settled into my bones. I remembered that moment. I had felt a sudden wave of confusion, a fog that descended on my brain out of nowhere. I had thought it was just a senior moment, a terrifying slip of the gears. It was not age. It was poison. Kenji laughed, a low, satisfied sound. "Perfect. And Dr. Aris is on board." Dr. Aris, my family physician for 20 years, the man who had treated my high blood pressure, the man I played golf with. "He is expensive," Lydia said, the sound of her sipping a drink coming through the speaker. But he agreed. He has already started the paperwork for the diagnosis. Early onset dementia with rapid cognitive decline. He says with the symptoms caused by the medication, the court will have no choice but to grant the conservatorship. Conservatorship. The word hung in the air inside my car, heavy and suffocating. They did not just want my money. They wanted my life. They wanted to strip me of my rights, my dignity, my ability to make a single decision for myself. They wanted to turn me into a ward of the state with Lydia as my keeper, holding the keys to everything I had built. I looked down at my hands, resting on the steering wheel. They were trembling. For weeks I had been feeling dizzy, weak, unsteady on my feet. I had blamed it on 70 years of hard work. I had accepted it as the inevitable decline. But it was them. Every morning with my orange juice. Every night with my tea. They were chemically lobotomizing me. I listened as Kenji continued speaking in Japanese, his voice dropping lower, intimate and conspiratorial. "Once the court declares him incompetent, you will have full power of attorney. You can sign the sale documents on his behalf. We will transfer the company assets to my holding firm at a fraction of the market value." "And the board?" Lydia asked. The board will not be able to stop it. You will be acting in his best interest, liquidating a stressful asset to pay for his medical care. It is airtight, Lydia. Project Sunset is a go. Project Sunset. They had given my destruction a code name. We just need 1 more week, Kenji said. Keep the dosage high. Make sure he looks confused in public. We need witnesses. We need people to see a man who cannot even tie his own shoes. I took the earpiece out. I had heard enough. I started the car and drove home. My hands were steady on the wheel now, the anger burning away the fog of the drugs. I drove with the precision of the man who had navigated the treacherous waters of Tokyo's shipping lanes in the 80s. When I arrived at the estate, I went straight to the master bathroom. I opened the medicine cabinet. There it was. The amber bottle labeled Daily Multivitamin. It looked innocent. It looked helpful. I opened the bottle and poured the pills into my hand. They were blue, small, and innocuous. I looked at them and saw bullets. I walked to the toilet and dumped them in. I flushed. I watched the blue swirl disappear down the drain, taking Project Sunset with it. But I could not just stop taking them. If I suddenly got better, they would suspect something. They would know I was onto them. I went to the pantry where I kept a stash of old candy-making supplies. I found a bottle of blue sugar pearls used for decorating cakes. They were almost the exact same shade and size as the pills. I filled the amber vitamin bottle with the sugar pearls. I placed the bottle back in the cabinet exactly where it had been. Then I stood in front of the large mirror above the vanity. I looked at my reflection. I saw the lines on my face, the gray hair, the eyes that had seen too much. They wanted a show. They wanted a confused, helpless old man who called the maid by the dog's name. They wanted a victim. I leaned in close to the glass until my breath fogged the surface. You want a performance, Lydia, I whispered to my reflection. You want a senile old fool. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes, giving them a vacant, watery look. I let a slight tremor take over my lip. I will give you a performance, I said, my voice dropping to a confused mumble. I will act so well you will pack my bags for the nursing home yourself. But you won't be sending me there. I straightened up, wiping the fog from the mirror. Because when the curtain falls on this little play of yours, I will be the only one left standing on the stage. I walked out of the bathroom ready for my role. Tonight, when Lydia came home, she would find her husband staring at a blank television screen, drooling just a little. And she would smile, thinking she had won. She had no idea she was looking at a man who had just declared war. The living room was filled with the suffocating scent of fresh lilies and the high-pitched chatter of Lydia's social circle. It was a Tuesday afternoon tea, a ritual where the wealthy wives of the neighborhood gathered to compare diamonds and complain about their staff. Today, however, the main attraction was not the imported oolong tea or the macaroons flown in from Paris. The main attraction was me. I stood in the hallway, adjusting my suspenders with fumbling hands. I had spent the last 10 minutes in the powder room adjacent to the living room, psyching myself up for the most humiliating performance of my life. I needed them to believe I was gone. I needed the rumor mill to churn out stories of Harrison Caldwell's complete mental collapse so that when Lydia filed for conservatorship, no one would bat an eye. I took a deep breath and opened the bathroom door. I stepped out into the hallway, but I did not close the door behind me. I left it wide open, exposing the toilet to the elegant gathering in the next room. It was a small indignity, but a powerful one. It screamed a lack of awareness that only a decaying mind could excuse. I shuffled into the living room, dragging my left foot slightly on the Persian rug. The conversation died instantly. 12 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I saw pity. I saw disgust. I saw the morbid curiosity people have when they look at a car crash. Lydia was holding court on the main sofa, pouring tea from a silver pot. When she saw me, her smile tightened just a fraction before she smoothed it into a mask of long-suffering patience. Harrison, darling, she cooed loud enough for everyone to hear. Did you have a nice nap? Come say hello to everyone. I blinked vacantly at the room. I let my jaw hang loose. I focused my gaze on Mrs. Vanderbilt, a woman I had known for 20 years, a woman whose husband I had played golf with at the club. Hello, Mother? I rasped, my voice cracking. Did you bring my soup? Mrs. Vanderbilt recoiled, pressing her hand to her pearl necklace. Oh, my heavens, she whispered. Lydia rushed over to me, her heels silent on the thick carpet. She took my arm with a grip that was painful in its intensity, digging her manicured nails into my bicep, while her face radiated gentle concern. No, Harrison, she said softly. That is Clara. You remember Clara, don't you? Your mother passed away a long time ago, sweetie. I pulled away from her, acting confused and agitated. No soup, I mumbled. I want to go home. We are home, darling, Lydia said, steering me toward a wing-back chair in the corner. Just sit here. I will get you some tea. She turned back to her friends and sighed a long, tragic sound that sucked the air out of the room. I am so sorry. Everyone, she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. It has been a hard week. The decline is accelerating so fast. Some days he does not even know who I am. Oh, Lydia, you are a saint, Mrs. Vanderbilt said, reaching out to squeeze Lydia's hand. I do not know how you do it. Taking care of him like this. It must be exhausting. It is, Lydia admitted, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. But I love him. I promise to take care of him in sickness and in health. It is my cross to bear. The room erupted in a chorus of sympathetic murmurs. They looked at Lydia as if she were Joan of Arc. They looked at me as if I were a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. I sat in the chair, staring at my knees, fighting the urge to vomit. The injustice of it burned in my throat. This woman who was poisoning me, who was planning to steal my life's work, was being canonized in my own living room while I was being written off as a burden. Then the doorbell rang. The maid opened it, and Kenji walked in. He was not invited to the tea, of course, but he walked in with the confidence of a man who owned the place. He was wearing a casual blazer and carrying a folder, ostensibly there for business, but I knew better. He was there to gloat. He was there to watch the show. Mr. Sato, Lydia said, brightening immediately. I am so sorry we are entertaining. Kenji bowed smoothly to the ladies, charming them instantly with his smile. My apologies, ladies. I just needed to drop off some urgent papers for Mr. Caldwell. I will not intrude. He walked over to where I was sitting. He stood over me, blocking the light. To the room, it looked like a respectful business associate paying his respects to a mentor. He leaned down, placing a hand on the back of my chair. He brought his face close to my ear, intimate and threatening. Hello, Mr. Caldwell, he said in English. Then he switched. The Japanese flowed out of him like venom, quiet and deadly, meant only for me. Look at you, he whispered. You look like a confused old pig, sitting in your own filth while your wife entertains the court. I stared straight ahead, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair. My knuckles turned white. The insult was one thing. Being called a pig in my own house by this parasite was infuriating. But it was the proximity, the smell of his cologne, the smugness in his voice that made my blood boil. Soon, Kenji continued in Japanese. Soon this will all be over. We are going to put you in a home, Harrison. One of those places that smells like urine and bleach. And Lydia and I will drink champagne in this very room and laugh about how easy it was. He patted my shoulder, a heavy, condescending thud. Hang in there, old man, he said in English, straightening up and winking at Lydia. Lydia walked over with a cup of tea on a saucer. Here, Harrison, she said. Drink this. It will calm you down. I looked at the tea. I knew it was laced with the blue sugar pearls I had swapped, but to them it was the sedative that would turn my brain to mush. I reached for the cup. I made my hand shake violently. The cup rattled against the saucer, a frantic chime of china. "Careful," Lydia said, her voice sharp. I took the cup. I lifted it halfway to my mouth. And then I let my hand spasm. The cup tipped. Hot tea splashed all over my trousers, soaking into the expensive upholstery of the chair and dripping onto the antique rug. "Oh, for God's sake," Lydia snapped, her patience finally snapping. The room went silent again. The ladies looked away, embarrassed for me, embarrassed for Lydia. "I am sorry," I wailed, letting my voice rise to a pathetic high pitch. "I am sorry, Mommy." Lydia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She turned to her friends. I think we need to cut this short," she said, her voice tight. "I need to get him cleaned up." "Of course, Lydia. We understand. You are so brave." As the guests filed out, whispering about the tragedy of Harrison Caldwell, Kenji remained. He stood by the fireplace, watching me with a look of pure triumph. When the last guest was gone, the door clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy. Lydia turned to me, the mask gone. Her face was twisted in disgust. "You clumsy old fool," she hissed. "That chair is silk. Do you know how much it costs to clean that?" Kenji laughed. "Let it go, Lydia. When we sell the company, you can buy 1,000 chairs. Look at him. He is finished. The drugs are melting his brain." He walked over to Lydia and wrapped an arm around her waist right in front of me. He kissed her neck. "He is not even there anymore," Kenji said, looking at me with dead eyes. "The lights are on, but nobody is home." I sat there, wet tea cooling on my legs, watching my wife melt into the arms of the man who wanted to destroy me. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp stabbing ache of betrayal that no amount of preparation could numb. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout in fluent Japanese that I was going to bury them both. I wanted to grab the fireplace poker and end it right now. But I forced myself to swallow the rage. I forced myself to shrink into the chair, to look small and defeated. "I just want to go to bed," I whispered. "Then go," Lydia said, waving a hand dismissively. "Go to your room and stay there. I do not want to see you for the rest of the night." I slowly pulled myself up from the chair. I shuffled toward the door, my head down. I could hear them giggling behind me, the sound of a champagne cork popping. I walked down the hall, past the portraits, past the life I had built. I went into my study and locked the door. I moved to the window and looked out at the sprawling lawn, the sun setting over the empire that was supposedly slipping through my fingers. My reflection in the glass stared back at me. I did not look like a confused old pig. I looked like a general surveying the battlefield. They thought I was finished. They thought the game was over. I walked to my desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I sat down and picked up a pen. My hand was steady as a rock. They wanted to buy my company. They wanted to use the power of attorney to sell it for pennies on the dollar to Kenji's shell corporation. They thought they were buying a gold mine. I started writing. Columns of figures, names of assets, shell companies of my own. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted. I was going to let them buy the company. But by the time they signed the papers, that company would be nothing but a hollow shell loaded with debt and liabilities that would drown them. I was going to strip it bare. I was going to move the patents, the real estate, the cash reserves into a trust they could never touch. I wrote through the night, the plan forming in my mind with crystalline clarity. "You want the company, Kenji," I whispered to the empty room. "You can have it." I drew a line under the final figure. "I hope you like debt, because I am about to give you $40 million of it." The office of my attorney. Sullivan smelled of stale cigar smoke and old leather binding. The kind of scent that suggests decades of secrets buried in filing cabinets. We were not burying a secret today, however, we were manufacturing one. Sullivan sat behind his massive oak desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he scrutinized the document we had spent the last 6 hours perfecting. It was a masterpiece of forgery, not in the illegal sense, but in the theatrical sense. It was a draft contract, a memorandum of understanding between my logistics company and the Department of Defense. "It looks real," Sullivan grunted, running a finger over the embossed seal of the United States government. "The paper stock is correct. The watermarks are there. Project Leviathan. $200 million for Pacific Fleet Supply Chain Management." He looked up at me, a glint of amusement in his tired eyes. "You know, Harrison, if you were not so rich, you would have made a terrifying con artist." I took the folder from him. "I am not conning anyone, Sullivan. I am simply giving a greedy man exactly what he wants to see. I am feeding his confirmation bias. Kenji thinks I am sitting on a gold mine that I am too senile to manage. This document just confirms that the gold mine is 10 times bigger than he thought." I placed the document inside a red folder stamped with the words, "Confidential and eyes only." "If Kenji sees this," Sullivan warned, leaning back in his chair, "he is going to lose his mind. He will try to close the deal yesterday." "That is the point," I said, standing up and buttoning my coat. "He is hesitant right now. He is trying to lowball the valuation using the dementia diagnosis to drive the price down to the floor. But if he thinks the company is about to sign a $200 million government contract, he will realize that even paying full price is a steal. He will scramble to buy the shares before this news goes public, and he will leverage everything he has to do it." Sullivan finished. "Exactly," I said. "He will borrow from the Yakuza. He will mortgage his properties in Tokyo. He will empty his accounts. He will go all in on a hand he thinks is unbeatable. And when he folds," I said, walking to the door, "he will realize he bet the farm on a bluff." I drove home with the red folder on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. The plan relied entirely on Lydia's lack of boundaries. I knew she snooped in my study when I was asleep or out of the house. She was looking for bank statements, hidden cash, anything she could siphon off. When I arrived at the estate, I made a show of carrying the folder into the house, clutching it to my chest, as if it were precious. Lydia was in the living room, pretending to read a magazine. I saw her eyes dart to the red folder immediately. "Hello, Harrison," she said, her voice dripping with that fake concern. "You were gone a long time. Did you get lost again?" I blinked at her, clutching the folder tighter. No. I was with Sullivan. Business. Important business. I hurried past her toward my study, my gait shuffling and uneven. I went inside and closed the door, but I did not lock it. I walked over to my desk. I cleared a space right in the center. I placed the red folder there. Then I opened it just a fraction, so the Department of Defense seal was visible. I stood there for a moment, looking at the trap. It was simple. It was elegant. I left the study, leaving the door slightly ajar, just a crack. It was the kind of mistake a forgetful old man would make. I went upstairs to my bedroom and changed into my pajamas. I sat in the armchair by the window and pulled out my tablet. I opened the secure app that linked to the hidden camera Donnelly had installed in the eye of the taxidermied owl on my bookshelf in the study. The feed was crisp and clear in high-definition night vision. I waited. 10 minutes passed. I heard the floorboards creak in the hallway. On the screen, the study door pushed open slowly. Lydia slipped inside. She was wearing her nightgown, moving with the silent grace of a predator. She scanned the room, ensuring I wasn't sitting in the dark corner. She went straight to the desk. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She saw the red folder. She hesitated for a second, her hand hovering over it. Then she flipped it open. I zoomed in on the screen. I watched her eyes widen as she scanned the first page. I saw her lips move as she read the numbers. $200 million, 5-year term, renewable. Her hand flew to her mouth. She was shaking. Not with fear, but with adrenaline. She had just found the winning lottery ticket. She immediately pulled her phone from her robe pocket. She snapped a picture of the cover page. She turned the page and snapped another picture of the financial breakdown. She took photos of the entire summary. Then she carefully closed the folder and placed it back exactly where I had left it, adjusting the angle to match the dust lines. She backed out of the room and closed the door, leaving it just a crack ajar. I switched the camera feed to the one in the hallway. I watched her run toward the guest room where she slept now. She was dialing as she ran. I switched to the audio feed from her phone, the bug active and recording. "Kenji, pick up," she hissed into the phone. A moment later, Kenji answered, his voice groggy. "It is late, Lydia." "Wake up," she snapped. "You are not going to believe what I just found." The old fool left a folder on his desk. He was at his lawyer's today. "What is it?" Kenji asked, his voice sharpening. "A government contract," she whispered fiercely. "A Department of Defense logistics contract." "Kenji, it is for $200 million. Silence on the line. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Are you sure? I have the photos. I am sending them now. Look at the dates. It is set to be signed next week. Harrison has been sitting on this. That is why he has been acting so secretive. He is not just senile, he is hoarding the deal." I heard the ping of the photos being delivered on Kenji's end. There was a long pause as he read them. "My God," Kenji whispered. "This changes everything." "It does," Lydia said. "If we wait for the conservatorship, the court might audit the company valuation. If they see this contract, the price of the company will skyrocket. We will never be able to afford it. We have to buy him out now. Before he signs this, if we own the company, when this signature hits the paper," Kenji said, his voice trembling with greed, "the value of the shares will triple overnight. We will make $100 million in a day." "But we need cash," Lydia said. "We need to buy his shares immediately. We need to make him an offer he will accept in his confused state." "I can get the cash," Kenji said. "I have friends in Tokyo. I can leverage the real estate portfolio. I can borrow against the future value of the contract." "But that is risky, Kenji. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Kenji snapped. "Did you see the seal? It is a government contract, Lydia. It is guaranteed money. It is the golden goose. I am going to call my bankers. I am going to call the lenders. We are buying that company, Lydia. We are buying it tomorrow." I smiled in the darkness of my bedroom. The hook was set. The line was tight. Kenji wasn't just biting, he was swallowing the bait whole. He was about to leverage every asset he owned, borrow money from dangerous men, and expose himself financially in a way he could never recover from. He was buying a hollow shell loaded with debt, thinking it was a diamond mine. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Donnelly, who was monitoring the wire transfers. Alert triggered. Large volume inquiries on Sato's accounts in Tokyo. He is liquidating stocks. He is putting up his family estate as collateral. He is moving fast, Mr. Caldwell. The shark is hungry. I typed back a single word. Good. I put the tablet down and looked out the window at the moon. The trap was primed. Tomorrow they would come to me with an offer. They would try to rush me. They would try to force my hand, thinking they were taking advantage of a confused old man. And I would let them. I would let them hand me $50 million of borrowed money. And in exchange, I would hand them a company that was effectively worthless. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly. The nightmare was almost over. The reckoning was about to begin. I sat there in the dark for another hour, waiting for the house to settle into silence. The adrenaline of setting the trap was beginning to fade, and in its wake I felt the physical toll of the last few months crashing down on me. My hands were trembling, and this time it was not an act. It was the residue of the poison that was still working its way through my system. Even though I had stopped taking the pills days ago, the toxins lingered. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, and my vision blurred at the edges. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled down a small framed photograph that I kept hidden behind a row of encyclopedias. It was a picture of me and my first ship, the Kestrel, docked in Yokohama Harbor in 1982. I was young then. I was hungry. I had leveraged every cent I had to buy that rusting hulk of metal. Everyone told me I was crazy. Everyone told me the shipping lanes were too crowded, that the competition was too fierce. But I saw lines on the map that they didn't. I saw connections. I ran my thumb over the glass. I remembered the smell of the salt spray and the diesel fuel. I remembered the sleepless nights negotiating with union bosses who wanted to break my legs. I had built this empire with sweat and blood and sheer force of will, and now a woman who had never worked a day in her life, and a man who treated business like a casino, were trying to take it from me while I sat in a chair and drooled. The anger flared up again, hot and cleansing, burning away the headache. I realized then that what I was about to do at the bank wasn't just a financial maneuver. It was an act of purification. I had to destroy the company to save it. I had to burn down the structure I had spent 40 years building because it had become infested with rot. It was a hard thing for a creator to destroy his creation. It felt like cutting off a limb to save the body, but it was necessary. I thought about my daughter Catherine. I thought about the way Lydia had intercepted her calls, telling her I was too sick to speak or too angry to listen. I had let that happen. I had been so blinded by Lydia's youth and her attention that I had let her isolate me. That was my sin. And tonight I was going to begin my penance. I went to the small bar in the corner of the study. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand shaking as the glass clinked against the carafe. I drank it down, imagining it washing the last of their poison out of my veins. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 1 in the morning. The house was dead quiet. The rain was beginning to lash against the windows, a precursor to the storm that was rolling in. It was time. I put the photograph back behind the books. I would come back for it later. Right now, I had a meeting with a Swiss banker and a destiny to rewrite. I buttoned my shirt, checking my reflection in the darkened window. The old man was gone. The captain was back at the helm, and he was steering the ship straight into the storm. Thunder rattled the window panes of the estate, shaking the glass in its frames. It was a torrential downpour, the kind of storm that drowns the world in gray noise and keeps sensible people indoors. It was the perfect cover. Lydia was in the West Wing, likely sipping champagne and dreaming of spending my money on a yacht in the Mediterranean. She thought I was in bed, medicated, and drooling into my pillow. She thought the old man was down for the count. I dressed in the dark, moving with the silent efficiency of a cat. I pulled on a black raincoat and a pair of nondescript shoes. I slipped out the side door, avoiding the creaky floorboard on the 3rd step that I had memorized 30 years ago. The rain hit me instantly cold and sharp, but I did not feel the chill. I felt only the heat of the fire burning in my gut. I bypassed the luxury cars in the garage and took the old Buick I kept for errands, the one car Lydia would never be caught dead in. I drove through the storm, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. The streets were empty. The city was asleep. But money never sleeps, and neither does revenge. I pulled up to an unassuming building in the financial district. There were no neon signs, no grand entrances, just heavy steel doors and a security camera that blinked red in the darkness. This was the local branch of a private Swiss bank, the kind of place that did not advertise because the people who needed it already knew where it was. I buzzed the intercom. A moment later, the heavy lock clicked and the door swung open. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me in the vault room. He was a man made of ice and numbers, impeccable in his suit despite the late hour. He did not ask why a 70-year-old man was sneaking around in a storm. He did not ask about my wife. He simply gestured to the stack of documents on the mahogany table. "Is everything prepared?" I asked, shedding my wet coat. "Everything, Mr." Caldwell Sterling replied, his voice smooth and neutral. The paperwork for the Nemesis Trust is ready for execution. We have structured the asset transfer exactly as you requested. I sat down. The room was quiet, insulated from the storm outside. It felt like a bunker. It felt like the cockpit of a bomber plane before the payload is dropped. I picked up the first document. This was the heart of the operation. In the business world, they call it asset stripping. It is a brutal term for a brutal act. It means taking a company and surgically removing everything that makes it valuable, leaving behind only a hollow carcass. I began to read. With a few signatures, I was transferring the ownership of every single patent, every piece of intellectual property, every real estate holding, and the entire cash reserve of my logistics company into the Nemesis Trust. This trust was locked down tight, controlled by a charitable foundation I had set up years ago. It was untouchable. It was invisible. And the company that Kenji was scrambling to buy, the company he was leveraging his entire life to acquire, would be left with nothing but the office furniture, the lease on the building, and the staff. Oh, and one more thing. I looked at the second stack of papers. This was the poison pill. I had arranged for a series of bridge loans, high-interest short-term debt obligations that were technically attached to the operating entity of the company. On paper, it looked like standard leverage for expansion. In reality, it was a $40 million tax liability and debt bomb that was set to detonate the moment the ownership changed hands. So let me get this straight, I said, looking up at Sterling. Once I sign these, the operating company is effectively insolvent. Technically, yes, Sterling said, allowing a small, dry smile to touch his lips. The moment the assets are transferred, the operating entity will have a debt-to-equity ratio that is catastrophic. Anyone buying the shares of the operating company would be purchasing a liability of $40 million with zero assets to back it up. Perfect, I whispered. It was cruel. It was devastating. Kenji wasn't just buying a worthless company. He was buying a financial black hole that would suck in every penny he had and every penny he had borrowed. He would be bankrupt within a week. The Yakuza would not be forgiving when they realized their collateral was gone. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. For months, Lydia had watched my hands shake. She had mocked my tremors. She had fed me soup because she said I couldn't hold a spoon. I looked at my hand now. It hovered over the signature line, steady as a rock. There was not a single tremor, not a single hesitation. The weakness was a lie. The frailty was a costume. I signed my name, Harrison J. Caldwell. The ink flowed dark and permanent. I signed the transfer deeds. I signed the loan agreements. I signed the trust establishment. Page after page, document after document. With every stroke of the pen, I was flaying my enemies alive, and they didn't even know they were bleeding yet. It took an hour. When I was done, the stack of papers was shorter, but infinitely heavier. It is done, Sterling said, gathering the documents. The transfers will trigger at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. By the time anyone checks the books, the assets will be safely in the Nemesis Trust. Thank you, Sterling, I said, standing up. I put on my raincoat. I felt lighter. The burden of being the victim was gone. I was the executioner now. I walked out of the bank and back into the storm. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the grime off the city streets. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the water soak my hair and run down my face. I didn't care. I felt cleansed. I looked in the direction of my estate where Lydia was sleeping in her silk sheets, dreaming of being a queen. Lydia, I whispered into the wind, my voice cold and hard as the steel door behind me. You want to be a queen. You want to rule over my empire. I laughed, a low, dark sound that was lost in the thunder. I will make you a queen, my dear, but you are going to be the queen of a kingdom of ash. I got into my car and drove home through the rain, ready for the final act. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of the master bedroom, casting long, dust-mote-filled beams across the duvet where I lay waiting. I had returned from the bank just hours before, slipping back into these sheets like a spy returning to enemy territory. My body was exhausted, my bones aching from the tension of the night, but my mind was a coiled spring. I heard the click of heels in the hallway, that specific rhythm, rapid and purposeful, that Lydia adopted when she smelled blood. The door handle turned. I let my eyes flutter shut, my mouth falling open slightly, a perfect tableau of geriatric decay. "Harrison." She called out, her voice bright and sharp like a scalpel. "Time to wake up, darling." I stirred, groaning softly, shifting my weight as if waking from a deep, drugged slumber. I blinked my eyes open, focusing hazily on the figure standing over me. Lydia was dressed for battle in a cream-colored power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless. She held a clipboard in one hand and a pen in the other. "Good morning, my love," she cooed, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her weight dipped the mattress, pulling me slightly toward her. "Did you sleep well?" I mumbled something unintelligible, licking my dry lips. She smiled, a tight expression that did not reach her eyes. "I have your breakfast coming, but first we need to take care of a little housekeeping. Dr. Aris sent over some forms for your flu shot. You know how bad the season is going to be this year. We need to make sure you are protected." She held the clipboard out to me. The paper was thick, creamy bond. It was folded over, so only the signature line was visible. "Just sign right here, Harrison," she said, uncapping a pen. "It is just a standard consent form." I looked at the paper. I knew exactly what it was. It was not a flu shot registration. It was an irrevocable power of attorney granting Lydia full control over my medical decisions and my immediate financial assets pending the court's decision on the conservatorship. It was the key to the kingdom. I reached for the pen, my hand trembling violently. I made a show of trying to grasp it, fumbling and letting it slide through my fingers onto the quilt. "Oh, Harrison," Lydia sighed, picking it up. "Focus. Just hold the pen." I gripped it, my knuckles white. I squinted at the paper. I should read it." I rasped, my voice thin. "Where are my glasses?" Lydia stiffened. "You do not need to read it, silly. It is just medical jargon. Liability waivers. Boring stuff. Just sign it so I can get it back to the office." I pushed myself up against the headboard, my hand shaking so hard the pen tip danced a chaotic rhythm in the air. "No," I said, a sudden flash of stubbornness entering my tone. "I want to read it. My father always said, 'Read before you sign.'" Lydia's smile vanished. The mask of the doting wife slipped, revealing the predator beneath. She leaned in closer, the scent of her perfume cloying and suffocating. "Harrison, do not be difficult," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "We do not have time for this. The messenger is waiting downstairs." I tried to push the clipboard down to see the text. I cannot see. It is blurry." "Sign the paper, Harrison," she commanded. I shook my head. No. Not until I read it. That was the breaking point. The veneer of patience shattered completely. Lydia dropped the clipboard onto my legs. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were like steel claws digging into my flesh with a strength I did not know she possessed. She squeezed hard, grinding my bones together. I gasped in genuine pain. "Lydia, you are hurting me." She did not let go. She squeezed harder, twisting my arm until I dropped the pen. She leaned over me, her face inches from mine, her eyes wide and manic with rage. "I am done playing nursemaid to a corpse," she hissed, spitting the words into my face. "I have wiped your mouth. I have listened to your boring stories. I have wasted 10 years of my life waiting for you to die. And I am not going to let a moment of stubbornness ruin everything I have worked for." She grabbed the pen and jammed it back into my hand, wrapping her fingers around mine and forcing my grip closed until I thought my fingers would snap. "Sign it," she snarled. "Sign it right now, you useless old man." I looked into her eyes. I saw the abyss there. There was no love. There was no pity. There was not even basic human decency. There was only greed, raw and consuming. This was the woman I had saved from debt. This was the woman I had taken around the world. This was the woman who slept in my bed. She was a monster. And in that moment, any lingering doubt, any shred of guilt I might have felt about what I had done at the bank the night before, evaporated. She deserved the ash kingdom I had built for her. She deserved every bit of the ruin that was coming. I whimpered, letting a tear leak from my eye. "Please, Lydia." "Sign it," she screamed, shaking my arm. Okay, I sobbed broken. "I will sign, just let go." She loosened her grip slightly, but did not let go. She guided my hand to the line. Right there, she said, her breath hot on my cheek. "Harrison J. Caldwell." I touched the pen to the paper. My hand was shaking, but my mind was calculating. A signature is a legal binding mark. But a signature made under duress, a signature that varies significantly from the established legal standard, can be contested. It can be voided. I focused. I let the tremor take over, but I guided it. I started the H correctly, but then I let the loop go too wide. I skipped the middle initial entirely. And for Caldwell, I dragged the pen, creating a jagged, illegible scrawl that looked like the work of a man in the throes of a seizure. It was my name, but it wasn't my signature. It was a forgery committed by the victim. "There," I whispered, dropping the pen. Lydia snatched the clipboard away instantly. She inspected the signature. It was a mess, a spider web of ink. But to her desperate, greedy eyes, it looked like victory. It looked like $50 million. "Good," she said, breathing heavily. "Good boy." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The rage vanished. The predator retreated. In the span of a heartbeat, she was the sweet, doting wife again. She leaned down and kissed me on the forehead, right over the spot where my headache was throbbing. Her lips were cold. "See, that was not so hard, was it?" she said, patting my cheek. "Now you rest. I will tell the maid to bring your soup." She turned and walked out of the room, the clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy relic. She did not look back. She did not see the man in the bed wipe her kiss off his forehead with the back of his hand. She did not see the cold, hard fire in his eyes. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall. I slowly sat up, rubbing my bruised wrist. A dark purple mark was already forming the imprint of her thumb, clearly visible against my pale skin. I would need to photograph that later. Another piece of evidence for the file. I reached into the nightstand and pulled out the receiver. I put the earpiece in. I heard the sound of a door closing. Then the sound of dialing. "Kenji, pick up," she said, her voice breathless with excitement. A pause. Then Kenji's voice. "Did you get it?" "I got it," Lydia said. "It was a struggle. The old bastard fought me. He wanted to read it." "Did he read it?" Kenji asked, sharp and anxious. "No," Lydia laughed. "I made him sign it. I had to get a little physical, but he signed. It is done, Kenji. I have the power of attorney. We control the company." "Excellent," Kenji said. "I have the lenders lined up. The bridge loans are approved based on the collateral of the company assets. We just need to execute the sale. Bring the papers to the office. We will set up the closing for tonight." "Tonight?" Lydia asked. "That is fast." "We have to move fast," Kenji said. "Before he has a moment of clarity. Before anyone asks questions." "Tonight, Lydia. We celebrate tonight." I heard the smile in her voice. "Okay. Tonight. Get the champagne ready, Kenji. I want the good stuff. The vintage we drank in Paris." You got it, baby. Tonight, we are kings." The line went dead. I took the earpiece out. I looked at my bruised wrist again. "Kings," I whispered to the empty room. Tonight they would meet to sign the papers. Tonight, they would use the power of attorney I had just given them to buy the company. They would transfer $50 million of borrowed money into the account I had designated, and in exchange they would receive the keys to a company that I had gutted 6 hours ago, a company that owned nothing but debt. Lydia thought she had forced me to sign my life away. She thought she had won. She did not realize that the signature she had twisted out of me was not a surrender. It was the trigger on a trapdoor, and she had just pulled it. I swung my legs out of bed. The pain in my wrist was throbbing, a constant reminder of her cruelty. But the pain in my heart was gone. It had been cauterized by the truth. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. I did not see a victim. I saw a man who was about to deliver the punchline to a very long, very expensive joke. "Get the champagne ready," I said to my reflection, mimicking her voice. I washed my face with cold water. I shaved carefully. I dressed not in pajamas, but in a suit, my best suit. The charcoal gray bespoke one I had worn to ring the opening bell at the stock exchange 10 years ago. Tonight was the signing ceremony, and I was not going to miss it. I was going to be there. I was going to be the ghost at their feast. I checked my watch. 9 hours until the meeting. 9 hours until the end of the world for Kenji and Lydia. I sat down in the armchair by the window and watched the rain fall. I was ready. Let them come. Let them bring their lawyers and their notaries and their stolen dreams. I was Harrison Caldwell, and class was about to be in session. The grand hall felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for the living. The crystal chandelier overhead, a monstrous thing of glass and light, seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. It was silent save for the rhythmic clicking of expensive Italian leather shoes on marble. Kenji Sato was pacing. He walked with the strut of a man who had already measured the drapes and decided they needed to go. He wore a tuxedo, a ridiculous affectation for a business signing. But Kenji was a man who believed life was a performance, and he was the star. He stopped near the fireplace, swirling a glass of amber liquid that I knew was my 60-year-old scotch. He turned to his lawyer, a man named Tanaka, who looked as sharp and dangerous as a scalpel. Kenji spoke in Japanese, his voice low but carrying easily in the cavernous room. "As soon as the ink is dry, get him out of here. I do not want to see his face when I wake up tomorrow." Tanaka nodded, tapping on his tablet. "We have arranged transport. There is a facility in the state uplands. State-funded. Minimum care. It is cost-effective." Kenji laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Perfect. Throw the old monkey in a cage. He won't know the difference. He thinks he is eating dinner with his mother half the time." I heard every word. I sat in the wheelchair, a prop Lydia had insisted on to sell the image of my frailty. My hands rested limply in my lap, twitching occasionally, as if misfiring signals. My head lolled to the side, my mouth slightly open. To them, I was a vegetable, a husk with a bank account. Inside my mind was a diamond, hard and sharp. I felt the cold rage circulating through my veins, keeping me focused. Every insult, every dismissal was fuel. I cataloged them. Monkey, cage, cost-effective. I would make him eat those words. Lydia stood behind me, her hands gripping the rubber handles of the wheelchair. She was tense, vibrating with a nervous energy that hummed through the frame of the chair. She leaned down, her breath hot and smelling of mints used to cover the scent of anxiety. "Almost done, Harrison," she whispered, her voice a sickly sweet coo. "Just be a good boy for a few more minutes. Then you can rest." She pushed me forward. The wheels squeaked on the polished floor, a sound of neglect that fit the narrative perfectly. We approached the massive mahogany table in the center of the room. It was set for a coronation. Documents were fanned out like playing cards. A notary sat at the end looking solemn and official. Lydia parked me at the head of the table. She locked the brakes. The sound was final, like a cell door slamming shut. "Gentlemen," Lydia announced, smoothing her dress. "Mr. Caldwell is ready." Kenji walked over. He loomed over me, blocking the light from the chandelier. He smelled of my scotch and arrogance. He leaned down, staring into my eyes, searching for any sign of the man I used to be. I gave him nothing. I stared past him, focusing on a spot on the wallpaper, blinking slowly, rhythmically. He smirked. He turned to the room, spreading his arms wide. "Shall we begin?" he asked in English. "The money is in position." The escrow agent, a neutral party hired for the transaction, nodded. "We have confirmed the wire, Mr. Sato. $50 million has been deposited into the escrow account. The funds are verified and locked." $50 million. It was a staggering sum, and I knew exactly where it had come from. My sources told me Kenji had leveraged everything: his family estates, his business holdings, his reputation. He had borrowed from men with tattoos under their suits and missing fingers. He had gone all in. He was betting his life that my company was worth $200 million. He had no idea he was buying a ghost. The closing attorney slid the document toward me. It was thick, bound in blue paper. The transfer of ownership. It was the death warrant for my legacy, or so they thought. "Mr. Caldwell," the attorney said, his voice loud and slow, as if speaking to a child. "This is the sale agreement. You are selling your shares to Mr. Sato." "Do you understand?" Lydia squeezed my shoulder, her nails digging in. "Of course he understands. We have talked about it all week. He wants to retire. Don't you, Harrison?" I let out a low groan, shifting in the chair. "Retire," I mumbled, slurring the word until it was barely recognizable. "Tired." "Exactly," Lydia said, beaming. "He is tired. He wants it over." The attorney looked unconvinced, but nodded. He placed an ink pad on the table next to the document. Given Mr. Caldwell's physical limitations, the attorney said, a thumbprint will serve as his signature, witnessed by the notary. It is legally binding. A thumbprint. They wouldn't even let me hold a pen. They wanted to strip me of even the dignity of writing my own name. Lydia reached for my right hand. Her skin was clammy. She lifted my hand, treating it like a piece of dead meat. She guided my thumb toward the black ink pad. Kenji moved closer. He was watching my hand with a hunger that was almost obscene. He was vibrating. This was it. The moment he became a king. "Just press down, Harrison," Lydia whispered. "Just a little print." I felt the cool, damp surface of the ink pad against my skin. Lydia pressed my thumb down, rolling it side to side to ensure a good coating. Then she lifted my hand and hovered it over the signature line. The room held its breath. The silence was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. This was the point of no return. Once my print hit that paper, the money would move. The company would transfer. The trap would snap shut. I looked at the paper. I looked at the ink on my thumb. It looked like a black hole. "Do it," old man Kenji whispered in Japanese, unable to help himself. "Sign your life away." I let my hand go limp in Lydia's grip. I let her do the work. She pressed my thumb onto the paper. She rolled it. She lifted it. There was a perfect black oval on the white paper. "Done," Lydia breathed. "It is done." The notary stamped the document. The attorney typed a command into his laptop. "Transaction executed," the attorney announced. "The funds are released from escrow to Mr. Caldwell's account. Title is transferred." Kenji let out a shout of triumph. He grabbed the document, holding it up to the light. "Mine," he yelled. "It is finally mine." He turned to Lydia, grabbing her by the waist and spinning her around. They laughed, a manic, hysterical sound. "We did it, baby," Lydia cried. "We are rich." Kenji released her and turned to me. His face was flushed with victory. He walked over and patted my cheek, a hard, disrespectful slap. "Thank you, Harrison," he sneered. "You have served your purpose. Now get out of my house." He waved a hand at Tanaka. "Call the van. Get this trash out of here." I sat there watching them celebrate their own funeral. They were drinking champagne on the deck of a sinking ship, and they didn't even know they were wet yet. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with air. I let the tremors in my hands stop. I let the fog in my eyes clear. I reached down and unlocked the brakes of the wheelchair. Click. The sound was sharp in the celebratory noise. Lydia turned, frowning. "Harrison," she asked, "what are you doing?" I placed my hands on the armrests. I pushed. I stood up. I rose slowly, unfolding my frame until I was standing tall and straight. I adjusted my cuffs. I buttoned my jacket. I stood there, 6 feet 2 inches of cold, hard reality. Lydia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The glass of champagne she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Kenji froze. He stared at me, his eyes wide, his mouth hanging open. I looked at him. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Sato-san," I said, my voice booming through the hall in flawless native Japanese. $50 million for a shell company with no assets and $40 million in debt. I laughed, a low, dark sound. "You are a terrible businessman." Kenji staggered back as if I had hit him. You speak." I stepped toward him. "I speak everything, Kenji. I heard every word, every insult, every threat." I turned to Lydia. She was shaking, her face pale as a sheet. "And you," I said in English. "My loving wife. The woman who poisoned me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a remote. "I think it is time we watched a movie," I said. I pressed the button. The projector screen descended, and the real show began. The room plunged into a heavy, suffocating silence as the projector screen flickered to life. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the cavernous hall, a stark contrast to the clinking of champagne glasses just moments before. On the screen, grainy but unmistakable, the image of my wife and her lover filled the wall. They were in the penthouse, sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing. The audio crackled through the speakers, sharp and piercing. "I cannot wait until he is gone," Lydia's voice echoed through the room, distorted but undeniable. "I am going to burn his clothes in the yard," and Kenji's voice responding in Japanese. "Patience, my love. The poison is slow, but it is undetectable. He will just drift away, and we will have everything." The color drained from Lydia's face so fast, it looked like her blood had simply evaporated. She staggered back, her hand clutching her throat, a silent scream trapped in her chest. Kenji dropped his glass. It hit the marble floor and shattered the sound like a gunshot, sending shards of crystal and expensive scotch flying. I stood there, the master of ceremonies in my own home, watching their world disintegrate frame by frame. I did not look at the screen. I looked at them. I savored the terror in their eyes the way a connoisseur savors a fine vintage. "Turn it off." Lydia shrieked, her voice cracking. "Turn it off! It is fake! It is a deep fake!" I ignored her. I took a step toward Kenji. He was trembling now, the arrogance that had defined him for months melting away into pure, unadulterated fear. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the documents on the table. The documents he had just signed. The money he had just transferred. I switched to Japanese, my voice rolling through the room like thunder, deep and resonant. "Sato-san," I said, savoring the syllables. "You look pale. Is the air conditioning too cold? Or is it the realization that you have just made the worst investment in the history of commerce?" Kenji opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. I walked over to the table and picked up the transfer deed. I held it up to the light. $50 million. I continued in Japanese, my tone conversational, almost friendly. That is a lot of money, Kenji, especially when it is borrowed. I know about the Yakuza loans. I know about the collateral. You leveraged your family estate. You leveraged your reputation. You leveraged your life. I dropped the paper back onto the table. And for what? For a company that as of 9 o'clock this morning owns absolutely nothing. What are you talking about? Kenji stammered in English, his accent thick with panic. I smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. I stripped it, Kenji. Asset stripping. It is a nasty little term, isn't it? While you were measuring the drapes for your new office, I was moving the furniture. The patents, gone. The real estate transferred. The cash reserves moved to a charitable trust that you cannot touch. I leaned in close to his face, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. You did not buy a logistics empire, Kenji. You bought a shell. A ghost. Oh, and you also bought the $40 million tax liability I attached to the operating entity. So technically, you are not just broke. You are $40 million in the hole. Kenji's knees gave way. He didn't fall, he just sank, collapsing into the chair I had vacated moments ago. He stared at his hands as if they didn't belong to him. He was doing the math. He was realizing that he was a dead man walking. The men he borrowed from did not accept excuses, and they certainly did not accept shell companies with negative equity. You demon, he whispered. I laughed. No, Kenji. I am just a businessman. And you are an amateur. I turned my back on him, dismissing him completely. He was no longer a threat. He was a corpse waiting for the burial. I turned to Lydia. She was standing by the fireplace, shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and confusion, as if she couldn't reconcile the frail old man she had tormented with the titan standing before her. Harrison, she whimpered, reaching out a hand. Harrison, please. I was confused. He made me do it. I looked at her hand, the hand that had squeezed my wrist until it bruised, the hand that had mixed powder into my tea, the hand that had caressed my enemy while I sat in the same room. I walked toward her slowly. She backed away until she hit the mantelpiece. Confused, I asked in English, my voice calm and deadly. Is that what you call it, Lydia? Confused. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small amber bottle. The one she thought contained the sedatives. The one I had filled with sugar. I rattled it. The sound was sharp and rhythmic. You wanted to take care of me, didn't you? I said. You wanted to make sure I wasn't in pain. That is why you gave me these. To help me sleep. To help me fade away. Lydia's eyes locked onto the bottle. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I only wanted to help, she sobbed. I uncapped the bottle and poured the blue sugar pearls into my hand. I held them out to her. And you, my love, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. The medicine you gave me. The special blend you and Kenji cooked up to turn my brain into mush. I let the pearls fall from my hand, cascading onto the floor like blue rain. I fed it to the stray cat that lives behind the greenhouse, the ginger one you always hated. Lydia gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. It died 3 days ago, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It went to sleep under the porch and never woke up. The vet said its heart just stopped. Massive toxic overdose. The room was silent save for the sound of Kenji's ragged breathing. Lydia slid down the front of the fireplace, collapsing into a heap of silk and misery. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing hysterically. You killed it, she wailed. You killed the cat. No, Lydia, I said, towering over her. You killed the cat. You meant to kill me. There is a difference, and the police are going to find that difference very interesting. I looked around the room at the lawyers, the notary, the staff. They were all frozen statues in a gallery of shock. The show is over, I announced, adjusting my cufflinks. I looked at the attorney Kenji had hired. Get your client out of my chair, I said, pointing at Kenji. And get him out of my house. He has some phone calls to make. I imagine his creditors will want to know why their collateral just evaporated. Kenji looked up at me, his eyes hollow. He knew. He knew he wasn't leaving this house to go to a hotel. He was leaving to go into hiding, if he was lucky. I turned back to Lydia. She was looking up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, looking like a broken doll. And you, I said, you can stay here. For now. The police are on their way. I wouldn't want you to miss your ride. I walked past her, past the shattered glass, past the ruins of their conspiracy. I walked to the head of the table where the signed document still lay. I picked it up. $50 million, non-refundable. I folded the document and placed it in my inside pocket. I walked to the double doors of the hall. I paused and looked back one last time. Kenji was weeping silently. Lydia was screaming into her hands. The projector was still playing the loop of their betrayal, a silent movie of their own making. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I felt 10 years younger. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a confused old man. I was Harrison Caldwell, and I had just won the war. The projector hummed like a mechanical insect in the silence of the room. On the screen, images flickered that turned the stomach of every person present. It was a montage of betrayal. There was Lydia in the penthouse wearing nothing but a silk sheet, laughing as she mimicked my tremor. There was Kenji counting stacks of cash, speaking into a burner phone about washing the money through my accounts. It was undeniable. It was raw. It was the end of their lives playing out in high definition. Kenji stared at the screen, his eyes bulging. He saw himself discussing the Yakuza loans. He saw the evidence of his money laundering laid bare for the world to see. He made a sound, a guttural roar of pure animalistic fury. He turned his gaze from the screen to me. I was standing near the head of the table, calm and untouchable. "You set me up," he screamed, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "You dead old man." He lunged. He moved with the desperate speed of a cornered rat. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and charged at me. Lydia screamed. The lawyers scrambled back, knocking over chairs. I did not move. I did not flinch. I did not have to. From the shadows near the service entrance, two men stepped forward. They were large, silent, and moved with a professional efficiency that Kenji could not hope to match. One of them caught Kenji's wrist mid-air, twisting it until the knife clattered to the marble floor. The other struck him behind the knees. Kenji collapsed, hitting the floor with a sickening thud. The bodyguards pinned him down, his face pressed against the cold stone, his expensive tuxedo bunching up around his shoulders. Sullivan, my lawyer, stepped forward from the corner of the room. He adjusted his glasses, looking down at Kenji with the dispassionate gaze of an undertaker. "Mr. Sato Sullivan," said, his voice cutting through the heavy air, "I feel I should inform you of the specific terms of the contract you just signed. Paragraph 14, Section C. All funds transferred are non-refundable regardless of the asset's condition or liabilities." Sullivan paused, letting the words sink in. "You have just purchased a company that has 0 liquid assets, 0 intellectual property, and $40 million in immediate debt obligations. Congratulations on your acquisition." Kenji stopped struggling. He lay there panting, his cheek pressed against the floor. But then a sound cut through the room. A phone ringing. It was coming from Kenji's pocket. It was a specific ringtone, a sharp, jarring electronic melody. Kenji's eyes went wide. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray ash. He knew that ringtone. It was his handlers. It was the men who had lent him $50 million based on a lie. They knew. Somehow they already knew the money was gone. "Please," Kenji whispered. He tried to lift his head, looking at me with tears streaming down his face. "Mr. Caldwell, Harrison, please, you have to give it back. If I do not pay them, they will kill me. They will cut me into pieces." I looked down at him. I remembered him calling me a monkey. I remembered him planning to turn my office into a brothel. "That sounds like a problem for your new company," I said coldly. "Perhaps you can restructure your debt." Lydia, who had been frozen by the fireplace, suddenly broke. She saw Kenji on the floor, broken and defeated. She saw the writing on the wall. She scrambled across the floor on her hands and knees, ignoring the glass shards that snagged her dress. She reached for me, wrapping her arms around my legs, burying her face in my trousers. "Harrison," she sobbed hysterically. "Harrison, baby, please. It was him. He made me do it. I was scared. He threatened me. He said he would hurt you if I didn't help him. I was trying to protect you." I looked down at the woman who had poisoned my tea. I looked at the woman who had mocked my shaking hands. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. Even in the face of video evidence showing her laughing and plotting, she was still trying to play the victim. She was still trying to gaslight me. I reached down. For a second she looked up, hope flaring in her tear-stained eyes, thinking I was going to stroke her hair. Instead, I peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. I did it with the same detachment one might use to remove a leech. "You were not forced, Lydia," I said, my voice flat. "I watched you. I listened to you. You enjoyed it. You laughed about burning my clothes. You laughed about my death." I shoved her away. She fell back onto the floor, weeping into her hands. "You are not a victim," I said. "You are just a bad actress who forgot her lines." From outside, the wail of sirens grew louder, rising above the sound of the rain. Blue and red lights began to flash against the tall windows, painting the room in strokes of violence. The heavy front doors burst open. Police officers swarmed into the room, their weapons drawn, but lowered when they saw the situation was contained. Behind them came a man in a trench coat. It was Detective Miller from the Financial Crimes Division, the man Aisha had coordinated with. He walked over to Kenji, who was still pinned to the floor. "Kenji Sato," he said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." They hauled Kenji up. He was sobbing now, begging incoherently, switching between English and Japanese, pleading for mercy, pleading for protection from his creditors. As they dragged him past me, he looked into my eyes one last time. He saw no mercy there. He saw only the reflection of his own ruin. Detective Miller turned to Lydia. She was still on the floor, a puddle of misery. "Lydia Caldwell," he said, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, administration of a noxious substance, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Two female officers approached her. They pulled her up. Lydia did not fight. She went limp, her eyes glazed over as the reality of her future crashed down on her. Prison. Public humiliation. Poverty. As they handcuffed her, she looked at me. "Harrison," she whispered, her voice broken. "What will happen to me?" I looked at her. I adjusted my jacket, smoothing the fabric where she had grabbed me. "I honestly do not care," I said. I turned my back on them. I walked over to the window and watched as they were led out into the rain. They were shoved into the back of separate squad cars. The lights flashed one last time, and then they were gone, driving away into the dark, wet night. The room was quiet again. The projector was still humming, displaying a frozen image of their betrayal on the wall. Sullivan walked over and unplugged it. The screen went black. "It is over, Harrison," Sullivan said softly. I looked around the empty hall, the broken glass, the overturned chair, the remnants of a life I had shared with a woman who wanted me dead. Yes, I said, it is over. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The weight of the deception, the weight of the act was gone. I was alone in a big, empty house, but for the first time in years, I did not feel lonely. I felt free. I walked to the table and picked up the bottle of scotch Kenji had opened. I poured 2 glasses. I handed one to Sullivan. To the future, I said, raising my glass. Sullivan clinked his glass against mine. To the future. I took a sip. It burned, going down warm and cleansing. It tasted like victory. The air in the first-class lounge at JFK International Airport smelled of expensive roasted coffee and silenced privilege. It was a quiet hum of travelers moving between worlds, a limbo of luxury where time seemed to suspend itself. I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching a massive jet taxi toward the runway. My reflection in the glass looked different than it had a month ago. The lines were still there. The gray hair was still there, but the stoop was gone. The tremors were gone. The man staring back at me was not a victim. He was a survivor. I checked my watch. She was late. Or perhaps she wasn't coming at all. I wouldn't blame her. Lydia had spent 5 years building a wall between me and my daughter, brick by lie. She had whispered poison into my ear, telling me my daughter only wanted my money, that she was ungrateful, that she was waiting for me to die. And like a fool, I had listened. I had let a stranger displace my own blood. Then I saw her. Catherine walked into the lounge, scanning the room with hesitant eyes. She looked so much like her mother that for a second my heart clenched in my chest. She had the same determined chin, the same intelligent eyes. She spotted me and stopped. She was bracing herself, expecting the confused, irritable old man Lydia had described to her for years. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket and walked toward her. I did not shuffle. I did not lean on a cane. "Hello, Catherine," I said, my voice steady and warm. "Dad," she breathed, her eyes widening. You look like yourself." "I am myself again," I said, finally. We sat down in the leather armchairs. The silence between us was heavy with years of missed birthdays and unreturned phone calls. I knew I couldn't fix the past with a check. I knew I couldn't buy forgiveness. But I could offer the truth. "I am sorry," I said simply. "I let a wolf into the henhouse and I let her chase you away. I was lonely, Catherine, and I was foolish. I traded your loyalty for her flattery, and it almost cost me everything." Catherine looked at her hands. "She told me you were sick, Dad. She said you didn't want to see me. She said you threw away my letters. She burned them," I said, feeling the old rage flare up for a brief second before I extinguished it. "She burned them in the fireplace, but she is gone now, and she is never coming back." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. I placed it on the table between us. "What is this?" Catherine asked. "This," I said, "is the Nemesis Trust." She looked confused. "I don't understand. I heard the company was sold. I heard it was bankrupt." "The company that Kenji bought is bankrupt," I explained. "The shell, the husk. But the soul of the company, the patents, the real estate, the liquidity, I moved all of it before he signed the papers. It is all in this trust." I slid the envelope toward her. "And you are the sole trustee." Catherine stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. "Dad, this is everything. It is your legacy," I said. "It is what I built for you, not for Kenji, not for Lydia. I want you to manage it. I want you to take what I built and make it something new, something better." "But what about you?" she asked, looking up at me with concern. "What are you going to do?" I smiled. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the passport in my breast pocket. I am going to take a vacation. A very long vacation. Catherine smiled a tentative, hopeful expression. Where are you going? Italy, I said. Lake Como. I have rented a villa. I hired a tutor. I am going to learn Italian. Japanese served me well in business, but I think Italian will serve me better for living. And what about them? Catherine asked, her voice dropping. What happened to them? I looked out the window at the planes taking off. Kenji was extradited 3 days ago, I said, my voice devoid of pity. The Japanese authorities were very eager to have him back. But his creditors were even more eager. The men he borrowed $50 million from. They are not the kind of men who forgive and forget. I took a sip of my sparkling water. Word is, he was screaming when they put him on the plane. He knows he is not going to a prison cell. He is going to a debt collection meeting that he won't walk out of. He wanted to be a big shot. Now he is just a cautionary tale. And Lydia Catherine asked, the name tasting bitter in her mouth. Lydia is currently a guest of the State Correctional Facility, I said. Her bail was denied. It turns out judges frown upon people who poison their spouses. She is facing 20 years. I paused, remembering the last report I had received from Sullivan. She is not doing well. Her charm doesn't work on cellmates who have nothing to lose. She is learning that without her designer clothes and her expensive creams, she is just a scared, lonely woman. She wanted to be a queen. Now she is scrubbing floors for 10 cents an hour. Catherine let out a long breath, as if she had been holding it for 5 years. It is really over, isn't it? Yes, I said. It is over. The parasites are gone. The host survived. The intercom chimed, announcing the boarding for Flight 402 to Milan. That is me, I said, standing up. Catherine stood up too. She grabbed the envelope, hugging it to her chest. But then she dropped it on the chair and stepped forward, hugging me instead. It was a fierce, tight hug, the kind that tries to bridge a gap of years in a single moment. I missed you, Dad, she whispered. I missed you too, kiddo, I said, my throat tight. I pulled away, holding her by the shoulders. You run the trust. You build a good life. And come visit me in Como. There is plenty of room. I will, she said, wiping her eyes. I promise. I picked up my carry-on bag. I did not look back. I walked toward the gate, my strap ride long and purposeful. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant. She smiled at me. Have a good flight, Mr. Caldwell. I walked down the jet bridge, the sound of my footsteps echoing on the metal. I thought about Kenji rotting in some hole in Tokyo. I thought about Lydia crying in her cell. They had looked at my gray hair and my wrinkled hands, and they had seen weakness. They had seen prey. They forgot the most important rule of nature. The old wolf at the head of the pack does not lead because he is the strongest or the fastest. He leads because he has survived. He leads because he knows where the traps are. He leads because he knows that you do not hunt with your teeth, you hunt with your mind. They tried to hunt me. They tried to corner me. And they found out too late that they were never the hunters. They were just the meal. I stepped onto the plane. The stewardess greeted me with a glass of champagne. Welcome aboard, sir, she said. I took the glass. I sat down in my seat. I looked out the window at the sprawling city of New York one last time. I had conquered it. I had defended it. And now I was leaving it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pair of black sunglasses. I put them on, shielding my eyes from the glare of the sun reflecting off the wing. I am not retired. I am not finished. I am just changing hunting grounds. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful vibration that shook the frame of the plane. I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in decades. The thrill of the unknown. The thrill of a new game. Let them think I am an old man. Let them underestimate me. I smiled, sipping the champagne. I am just getting started. They looked at my gray hair and saw a victim. They didn't realize that age is not a disability, it is armor. It is a library of mistakes I have already made and traps I know how to avoid. The greatest lesson I can pass on is this: never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you are weak. Because the moment they drop their guard is the moment you remind them who really runs the jungle. Silence is not surrender. It is just the deep breath before the kill. If you loved seeing justice served to those who deserved it, please hit the like button to support the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story of redemption. And tell me in the comments, what is the best way you have ever dealt with a liar? I want to hear your stories.